Hey there, my name's Miranda and welcome to another video. And today I'll be doing my favorite books that I read in 2018. So for 2018 I managed to read 50 books, which was what I had hoped to read, but I had set a more, what I thought, realistic challenge of about 30, so I far surpassed what my original challenge was. And I have to say I'm quite proud of that. And of those 50 books, it was a little difficult to pick my top 5 for the year, but I managed to pick 5 that I absolutely loved, and they just introduced me to some authors that I never would have thought I would read before, and I'm so excited for more works that are coming out by these authors and more works that are coming out in a couple of these series. I do also have 2 honorable mentions I will be mentioning in this video as well. Now, these works are not quite in any particular order. The only one is my number 1 read of the year. Other than that, the other 4 of my top 5 are interchangeable. Alright, so first, number 5 is Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab. So far this is the only one I have read in the Darker Shade of Magic trilogy, but I have to admit this was an amazing read. So I read this book quite a few months ago. I actually read it during a weekend trip to London with my university. It was one of the first times I did a themed read. And this book was amazing, and it has introduced me to the works of V.E. Schwab, and I am so happy that I've been introduced through this book. I even came home and ended up buying the special edition copy because I really wanted the special edition because I wanted to read the additional stories, and I really liked how pretty it was. Darker Shade of Magic follows 2 main characters, Kel, who is a magician from a land known as Red London, where there is magic everywhere, and he travels between 3 out of the 4 different Londons. Red London, his home where there is tons of magic. White London, where magic is steadily becoming scarce and people are becoming very violent trying to keep a hold of it. And Grey London, which is our world, and this is set during the regency of George IV. And then, of course, as I said, there are 4. There is also Black London, which is a world that was destroyed by magic, so nobody goes there. The other main character is a young woman by the name of Lila Bard, who is from Grey London, our world, and she's a thief, but she has dreams of becoming a pirate. So as I said, I absolutely love this book. Hands down, my favorite character was Lila. I absolutely loved her. I've only read the first little bit of the next book, but it had a lot of Lila in it, and it's already making me think I'm probably going to love the second book even more than the first one. So that is for this list, my number 5 pick read of the year. Next up at number 4, I have Truth Witch by Susan Dennard. So I've actually read the 3 books currently out in the Witchland series. The reason I picked the first one is, quite frankly, I just really love the introduction to this series. But generally speaking, all 3 books can sort of share a place on this list. In particular, I am just so excited to continue this series. I cannot wait for Blood Witch to come out. So this series follows a few different main characters, the main 2 of which are Sophia and Iseult, the Thread Witch. I'm sorry, I still don't quite know if my pronunciation is correct. I'm pretty convinced it's not. These 2 girls are best friends. One of them, Iseult, is a thread witch, which means she can see the threads that bind people, their friendship, their relationships to each other. Sophia, on the other hand, is a truth witch, which means she can sense when people are telling the truth and when they are lying. This power of hers is extremely rare and makes her very valuable to the leaders of her world. So the book follows the 2 of them and their adventures and what exactly is going on in their world and the struggle that is going on because of the ending of a truce and people wanting to use Safi's power for their own advantage. I can already tell you I'm not giving a very good descriptor for this book. I am not giving it justice, but it is an amazing series. It's rather complex. I'm still a little unsure what's going to happen, especially after I read Sight Witch. I mean, I have some ideas, but for the most part, I have no idea where this series is really going, and that's just keeping me even more excited. I thought I might have had it figured out in the first book. Second book, then I was questioning. Third book, I'm pretty sure I'm wrong now. My favorite thing about Truth Witch in general, though, is the fact that there isn't a heavy focus on romance. It's there, but it's not the main focus of a lot of different YA fantasy, which is something I appreciate so much. In fact, there's more of a focus on the friendship of the 2 girls. I also love how, in general, the series is changing my ideas and feelings behind a lot of characters with almost each chapter sometimes. And then, of course, my absolute favorite character in the series, Aduin, because he is awesome. So yeah, because of all that, this is my number 4 pick. My number 3 pick, and unfortunately I do not have my copy with me, I left it in Wales, but that is Vicious by V.E. Schwab. So yes, another V.E. Schwab book is on this list. I loved Vicious. If I had read it before Darker Shade of Magic, I probably would have been even more hooked on her writing than I am right now. Although I'm glad I read it later because then I've read it a lot closer to when I will soon be reading Vengeful. Yes, I still have not read it. This book follows 2 major characters, Victor and Eli, who were once college roommates. They decided to work together on a paper of Eli's where they looked at the creation of EO's extraordinary individuals. However, when they moved into the more practical portion of their research, things went horribly wrong and someone ended up dying. The book then fast forwards 10 years, Victor has escaped from jail and is hunting down Eli for revenge. My favorite thing about this book is that, quite frankly, majority of the characters are rather morally gray. And that's something I like. I don't really like a lot of characters that are very black and white. I don't like characters that are entirely good or entirely evil. I like it when they're evil, but sometimes they make a lot of sense, or they're good, but still make a couple decisions that make them seem not that good of people. So this is why I love this book so much. It had so many morally gray characters, and I loved how, even though the entire book takes place over a very short period of time, there were so many flashbacks that you slowly began learning exactly what happened to make these two hate each other so much. Therefore, it is my number 3 pick. Alright, and at number 2, and again, I do not have my copy, it is in Wales, but I have a substitute. Beren and Luthien by J.R.R. Tolkien, which is an extended version of the tale from the Silmarillion. Yes, so I'm holding up Silmarillion because the tale originally is in here. My copy is in Wales. I left it there because I plan on rereading it next year while I'm still over there. Beren and Luthien is actually my favorite story from the Silmarillion, so when I found out there was an extended version coming out, I was very excited. Even more so because when I finally got my hands on it and I read it, I realized it wasn't just an extended version, it was a history of J.R.R. Tolkien's creation of this Middle-earth legend. Or I guess Middle-earth history because in reality, it's Middle-earth history. But I love that the book expanded on what was in the Silmarillion and actually showed more versions of the tale, how Tolkien began it and where it eventually led to that was then published in this work. So that is why it is my number 2 pick. I loved just looking at how this story changed through the years and how Tolkien redeveloped it and expanded on it and created it. The scholar in me loved it. Therefore, it is my number 2 pick and another wonderful Tolkien book I got to read. Alright, so before I share my number 1 favorite read of the year, I do have 2 honorable mentions I would like to add to this video. First one, again, my copy is in Wales. In fact, I lent it to my housemate because she really wanted to read it once I was done. And that is Girls of Paper and Fire by Natasha Nagan. And as always, I'm very sorry if I mispronounced the last name. Girls of Paper and Fire actually almost made my top 5 list. It's most definitely my top 10 of the year. Because of that, I really want to mention it in this video. I adored this book. It was, quite frankly, one of the best books I've ever read. Girls of Paper and Fire follows the story of Lay, and I'm hoping I'm pronouncing this correctly, but based on the description of how people smile after her name is pronounced, I think I have it right. Lay lives in a world where every single year, 8 girls from the paper caste are chosen to become what are known as paper girls, concubines for the Demon King. This year, however, Lay is chosen to be a 9th girl. While Lay is in the palace learning how to be a paper girl, she then does the unthinkable. She falls in love with another paper girl. I absolutely adored this book. It was something I had never really read before. It was something completely brand new to me. There is, however, a trigger warning for this book. It does deal with sexual assault, so if you cannot read that, I do not recommend reading this. I know even with the trigger warning, I had a rough time with it. It was absolutely devastating and heartbreaking to read. That was something I appreciated about the book, was it did not shy away from these realities. It was a book that, while it was set in a fantasy universe, it had so many realities of what life would have been like in ancient societies that had those girls who had been chosen as concubines for the palaces of emperors. And then, of course, quite frankly, I thought the romance in it was one of the most beautiful romances I have ever read. Therefore, that book gets honorable mentions in this video. The next honorable mention is one I just recently read, and that is Bear the Nightingale by Katherine Arden. So this book was absolutely amazing to me on so many levels. For one, it was a book that dealt with Russian folklore, which is not something I read very often. A lot of my folklore fairy tales are European in origin. And when I say European, I mean Germany, France, UK, like Western Europe. Another thing I absolutely loved about this book, the writing style was just amazing. And then the last thing that made me love this book so much is how it dealt with the realities of the time. So this book follows a young girl by the name of Vasilisa. I might be mispronouncing that. I'm very sorry if I am. Vasilisa, or Vasya, as she is known to her family, is a young girl of a family in northern Russia. Vasya loves the old tales, particularly that of Frost, the blue-eyed demon of winter. One day, however, when her father comes back with a new wife and then later on a new priest arrives in the village, Vasya realizes that the changes that are being implemented is bringing danger to her village. So she does everything in her power to make sure she can protect her family and the village that she loves. So as I said, this book was absolutely magical. It was gorgeous. It was breathtaking. In fact, I loved it so much, I went out a couple of days later and immediately bought the sequel because I really need to know what happens next. That, and I love the writing style so much, I wanted to immediately get back into the author's writing. Therefore, it has earned a place as an honorable mention on this list. Alright, so now we are on to my number one favorite read of the year. This book I already knew I was going to like it when I read it. It had been recommended to me by my mother. In fact, strangely enough, she had told me what happens in it, so I already knew what was going to happen in this book. She did not, however, explain a few other events that happened in here, which is why I ended up absolutely loving this book, even though I already knew what was going to happen. And that book is Summers at Castle Auburn by Sharon Shin. I loved this book. Like, oh my gosh, I loved this book. I loved it so much, I told my parents I was really hoping to get a hard copy, and I received one for Christmas. As I said, this book was recommended to me by my mother. She had told me the ending of a particular part of the story, so I already knew a bit of what the ending was, but I did not know a lot of what else was happening in this book, so there was still a lot of surprises for me. This book follows a young girl by the name of Corey, and it follows 3 different summers she spends at Castle Auburn with her half-sister. Corey is the illegitimate daughter of a nobleman, and after he dies, the man's brother goes to Corey, finds her, tells her grandmother that it had been her late father's wish that she spend her summers at Castle Auburn with her half-sister. The grandmother agrees that every summer Corey may go to Castle Auburn, but for the rest of the year she lives as a peasant in her grandmother's village. The summers this book follows are the summers she is 14, the summer she is 17, the year before her sister is to marry the crown prince, and the summer she is 18 and the wedding of her sister is that same year. And in particular, it follows her changing perspective of the world through these different visits to Castle Auburn each summer. That was one of the reasons I love this book so much. It starts out as her being a very starry-eyed little girl. She absolutely is in love with everything. She thinks everything is perfect. But then as the years go by, she notices that things are probably not quite what they seem and begins to learn that everything she had thought was perfect or beautiful isn't that. Also, to be honest, one of my absolute favorite things in this book was the romance, because I was very shocked at what really happened. I was absolutely convinced that she was going to end up with one person and it was someone else entirely, and I did not think twice about it. I've already reread a bit of this, and rereading it I now can see some of the clues, but I did not notice them my first time around. And that was one of the things that I loved best about this book, was just how much it surprised me. Another reason I absolutely love this book, it's, quite frankly, a feel-good novel. Reading it makes me smile. I love the story. I love how she learns as she grows. I love how she changes as she grows. Therefore, because of how much I love the story, how much I love rereading it now that I have my own copy, and how much that this book surprised me even though I already knew the ending, this book is my number one favorite read of 2018. So there you have it. Those are my top 5 plus 2 honorable mention favorite reads of 2018. I'm just now realizing, looking at the stack I have beside me and thinking of the ones I don't have, pretty much all of them are fantasy. To be fair, that isn't that surprising, as fantasy is the majority of what I read. Oh well, besides a few books I most definitely have planned that I will be reading next year, one of my plans for 2019 is I would like to read more books outside of fantasy so I can experience more books in other genres. So maybe next year, my top 5 or top 10 list will have a lot more books on it that aren't just fantasy. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see more videos by me, both bookish and travel related, please be sure to click that subscribe button down below. And I'll see you next time.